Dames en heren, mag ik u van harte welkom heten op deze 56e Grand Round. En de Great Grand Round moderator, Jan Kramer, is er niet. Dus daarom neem ik het met veel genoegen en plezier van hem over. En dat genoegen en plezier is vooral ook omdat ik natuurlijk de spreker van vandaag, iemand van binnenuit, onze eigen onderzoeksdirecteur neuroscience Guillén Fernández, ook al heel goed ken als directe collega in de onderzoeksraad. Decaan en onderzoeksdirecteuren werken natuurlijk veel met elkaar. En ja, Guillén is bekend bij ons, onderzoeksdirecteur van het Center for Medical Neuroscience als onderdeel van het grotere Radboud Universiteitsbrede Donders Instituut. Hij is opgeleid als neuroloog en ook als neurowetenschapper in Bonn, in Maagdenburg en ook in Stanford. Is lid van de Europese Academie voor Wetenschappers. Heeft ook veel prijzen gehaald en hele mooie persoonsgebonden subsidies. Waar in ieder geval van genoemd moet worden de Vici natuurlijk, waar we allemaal veel respect voor hebben. En ook de IRC Advanced Grant die hij in ontvangst heeft mogen nemen. Dus we hebben hier van doen met een topwetenschapper uit eigen huis, die nu iets heel nieuws gaat vertellen over hoe we wetenschap beter kunnen bedrijven. Ik heb er al tussen neus en lippen een aantal dingen van gehoord. Dat is zeer inspirerend en ik geef hem dan ook graag het woord.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the kind introduction and for everybody being here. And for joining me in the discussion about how we might change the organization of research. This is just a working paper, which I would really like to discuss about. It's nothing fixed, it's nothing official, it's just my private ideas about how we might change the organization of research. The idea of this comes back from a Dundas session, the Dundas Institute. Every month we have a scientific meeting where the entire Dundas Institute is supposed to meet. And usually we talk about science, of course, but sometimes we try to reach a meta level and discuss about how science should be done or what should be changed in the system. And back in, I think, September 2015, so quite a while ago, we had the task to think about how science will look like in 2050. And we had kind of asked different people in the center from different kind of ages. And I was asked as one of the older ones to say something about my ideas. And during that discussion, a young PhD student, also from the UMC, Christian Utzerath, and I, we had pretty similar ideas about how science might evolve in the next decades. And because we kind of continued that discussion, and it ended up in a nice publication in one of our leading review papers, where we kind of wrote down our ideas how we might change the organization of science to be able to meet the challenges we are faced with. The way universities and actually in general science is organized nowadays actually dates back to Wilhelm von Humboldt, who established the integration of research and education as it is done in modern universities. A second important point in his design for the University in Berlin was that the academic freedom based on an unbiased knowledge and analysis was kind of a core ingredient. And also the education towards the students should lead to autonomous individuals that develop their own reasoning powers based on their scientific work. So that's kind of the cornerstone of, I think, the universities worldwide, and led to kind of the prototype of an Humboldtian scholar. This is an individual, independent genius. That's kind of our prototype, how a researcher should be. And this idea is actually ingrained in our structure of the university. So when you obtain a PhD, it's done based on the fact that you're able to do independent research. That's written in our PhD regulations. And if you become professor, the next title, you might do so entirely independent, even of the dean. So the content is independent then. Huh? And we do that almost like artists. We sign our work with our names, and we are very particular about the order of the names. That's a 100-year-old paper. The only thing that changed in the structure of the paper is that the abstract is in the back, not in the front. So in the past, probably the people read the entire paper and then did a recap and the summary. Now we start with the abstract and don't read further. And if you're really successful, then you are buried in the Westminster Abbey next to the kings and queens, and you have to be British, of course, and or you get a Nobel Prize for your science. So this is kind of the system we have in worldwide in universities, and we kind of praise this independent genius. And it was pretty successful, I think. Almost the entire modern science and insight we have is based on that system, extremely successful. And even in the last decades, we have seen tremendous progress also in medicine, like here, bionic, prosthesis, minimal invasive surgery, stem cell treatment, individualized cancer treatment, antiviral treatment, all the genomic treatment options and diagnostic options we have. So we have made tremendous progress. It's a very successful system. So it was all about that. But since several years, there are also other voices. This is a cover of a usually quite serious news magazine, The Economist, published in 2015, I think, a paper or an editorial and kind of a longer series of papers about how science goes wrong. And we have all these kind of headlines. Publication tsunami, more than 1 million publications in PubMed are added every year. The number is still monotonically increasing. We have a replication crisis, is a word that is often used, sometimes also application crisis. Some people are writing that we have limited progress. If you look into the European Union, the newest call on health, in terms of neuroscience, they say explicitly that the progress made based on neuroscientific insight and medicine is disappointing. And the people involved in science are also rightly complaining about the pressure and the career perspective. So there's a rocky career path, or there are other different negative points on that. So, but not only the popular press talked about that, also the Lancet had a workshop and a series of papers. They are nowadays very famous. Increasing value, reducing waste was kind of the headline. And they had 5 articles, all suggesting different lines of recommendations how to improve the biomedical research. One is about setting the right research priorities, of course, doing really good research in terms of design and analysis, improving the regulation and management, also addressing perhaps so far difficult topics in research, and the writing of the paper should be more useful so that you can really grasp the content. Also in the Netherlands, there's a quite influential movement, the Science in Transition. The headline on the website is Impact, Not Impact Factor, to make it very short. And they are criticizing the reliance on bibliometric data instead of societal impact of the research. I would like to make the proposition that all these recommendations, be it in the Lancet or in Science and Transition or somewhere else, are all important, and we should really look careful at them. They can improve the way we work. But I claim that they are just kind of treating the symptoms and are not the underlying cause of the problems we are faced on. I would like to make 4 points why the underlying problem is the actual aim of a change. There's quite an increase in numbers of scientists around the world. If you compare the beginning of the 19th century, you were able to know all your colleagues in the world on a certain topic. That's not possible anymore. In neuroscience, the big neuroscience meetings, we have 30,000 people. The peak has already reached a couple of years with 35,000. Now they're hovering around 30,000 people. And we are getting smaller and smaller in the area of people we know and interact with, relative to the total size. The absolute size stays pretty the same. We have kind of a capacity to have relationships for up to 150 people. And so if the scientific community gets larger and larger, we are more and more looking at a smaller group, and we are focusing on smaller, more specialized group. So the interaction and the exchange of ideas and findings gets harder. But also the knowledge increase leads to fragmentation. This is a graph showing at a certain point in time the known biochemistry of a human cell. And also here, everybody of us has a limited capacity to capture really the details around a certain area. And if you have more knowledge, that area gets more focused and focused. And therefore, it gets fragmented because you're not connected anymore to the knowledge of your co-scientists somewhere else. But not only to knowledge, but also the methods. Here, the wonderful Radboud Technology Centers, we have many techniques in-house, and someone who is an expert in genomics won't be an expert in imaging and vice versa, and for all the others. So you need more and more experts to work on the same problem with different expertise. A fourth point is a different dimension, is that the scientific problems we are getting to are more and more complex. The low-hanging fruits are eaten up. The easy solvable problems are solved. And the problems we are faced with are progressively more difficult. So we have a kind of a conflict between complexity on one hand. The medical problems we have to solve are getting more complex. But on the other hand, our knowledge and the way we work is getting more fragmented. And that's a real conflict. We can't do much about the complexity. It's just a fact. Perhaps we can decide more carefully about which problems might be easier to solve than others. But in general, about the complexity, we can't do much. The question is, what can we do about the fragmentation? So the question I would like to discuss, I think I have not that many slides, I would really like to get into a discussion, is how to defragment that. So, of course, the first reflex is collaborate. The politicians have that already understood a while ago, and therefore they're kind of torturing our scientists into collaborations, and there we have to work together, and sometimes we like that and sometimes we don't. But the fundamental problem is that our model of an independent genius is a counterforce to this collaboration, because everybody in the collaboration has to find his or her advantage in the collaboration, his or her position on the author list, and these kinds of things, and his and her hypothesis. And therefore, these collaborations are always a compromise between the interest to collaborate, to get something done together, and the individual career aspirations. And in addition, since we are all independent, the organization of such collaborations are often not that easy, because there's just no structured control of that, or often not. Sometimes there is, but not that often. So there are very successful collaborations, no doubt about that, but in general, that is not, in my view, the optimal model. So therefore, I would like to go a step further and say we do work in teams, structured teams. And I would like to make that clearer, to distinguish at certain points between what a collaboration is and what team science is. So in one, you have a group of independent PIs that go together continuously or just temporarily. And this is a systematic study, where there's a plan, and then everybody gets a certain task assigned that fits together optimally. Usually, collaborations are many small-scale studies, usually put into work packages, and then they're put together that the referees give the money for it. In contrast, team science can go for a large-scale study, systematically analyzing a certain problem, doing perhaps some boring studies you wouldn't do as an independent researcher. You have usually fragmented infrastructure. It's my lab, and I have that machinery, that's mine, but you could have high throughput infrastructure for such a team science effort. The standardization between the different groups is also kind of a hindrance in really true collaboration in team. So for example, I remember vividly when I tried to organize a translational neuroscience unit to get together the different researchers into one unit. It was very difficult because everybody had a different narcosis protocol, everybody had a different surgery protocol, and after a while, now it's standardized. So in team science, you can have standard operation procedures, efficient quality assurance and control so that things are done properly. Usually in collaborations, the aim is to have many papers. When we have our Spreker finished, I think there will be a list of many papers, and that's the thing. A team science effort could be just one report or one annual report, progress report, and that would be it. In the collaboration, everybody from the PhD student, postdoc to PI has to have his or her own academic career, get his grants and so forth. We are very kind of critical about and sensitive about our CV, to building up our CV. In a team science effort, people, like everywhere in knowledge industry or public institutions, could have conventional careers with some promotions, and that's it. Should work. Although we do quite some efforts in putting our data into open and public repository, that's still kind of a difficult sometimes for some research. And the team science effort, I think it's integrated with an open data repository. So there's quite a difference between collaboration and team science. And even the prototype of an egomanic in Silicon Valley noticed that great things in business are never done by one person, they're done by a team of people. And also in science, there are some fields that are ahead of us. For example, physics, because they are forced perhaps into that, because the machines are so expensive, they can't do that in a fragmented way. They write papers with 5,000 authors. So then the author list makes not that much sense anymore. So there's really, everybody has a certain function. There are also the initial steps in biosciences. For example, the Allen Brain Institute. Allen was one of the Microsoft founders, and he gave away some 100 million euros for a brain science institute in Seattle. And this is an institute fully dedicated and embracing team science effort. There's a structured procedure, there's no PI, and just staff scientists, and they work on very specific questions over a course of some time, and they are published online. The data is freely available to everybody, Allen Brain Atlas, for example. And Christoph Koch, the director of that institute, will give soon a lecture at the Healthy Brain event we have by the end of the month. So this is really a place where this team science is done in biosciences. And also many institutions are thinking about it, like the National Cancer Institute, the National Research Council, or the British Academy of Medical Sciences. They're all thinking about how we can integrate team science. So it's not my idea, although in most of these publications, it's still more a collaboration than team science, I have to say. They're kind of pushing it and calling it team science, but it's more about collaboration. So I gave you so far a mixed message, I would say. This individual science approach was very successful. You have the independent viewpoint, you have the crowd intelligence, you have competition that may motivate us and might be quite successful. In contrast, a team science effort might be quite bureaucratic. You have planned research like a socialist 5-year plan, and if you go into the wrong direction, you may make quite big detours. So there's not everything positive. But as I explained also, individual sciences is fragmented, has usually short-term strategy, is biased. I would like to confirm my hypothesis. And in the numbers we have nowadays and the money available, it's hyper-competitive. In that contrast, team science can be comprehensive, systematic, has a long-term relevance. It has an independent execution, so if it's not the same people that came up with the hypothesis, test them independently, and you have a normal profession. So somehow, what I'm getting at is we need a balance between individual science and team science. How can we find a good way where in our university or in our science landscape is a balance between this individualistic science and the team science. How can we integrate that? And that's, I think, the difficult task, besides the task how to get there. The way is also difficult. But I will make some proposals. So this is one kind of comprehensive proposal how the world might look after one has introduced team science. So let's assume that scientific circle. There's an individual scientist, like we are nowadays, yeah? And we do our pilot studies, we do our experiments as we do now, and we do that all on our structural funding, no grants. We just have the freedom to do that research. And we published initial reports and papers as we do. It's pretty similar as we do now. But if you have something really good, if you think that this is really relevant, then we write a grant proposal. Then we submit that grant proposal to NWO and say, I would like to independently confirm that hypothesis and see the relevance in that and that point. And NWO might get different of those proposals that are all related. And then they commission kind of they say, which institute can test this hypothesis in a comprehensive way. And then one part of the UMC says, we can do that. Or even an independent institution in Amsterdam says, we can do it, and we do it cheaper and better. We have better quality things, and therefore we can do it. And then they do the study independently, only focusing on the flawless execution, unbiased, of the hypothesis, and they make a comprehensive report. They have an open data repository, and that knowledge can then again be used by the individual scientists for doing the next experiments. So that system would be slower, but I think given that we are publishing more than 1 million papers, a bit slowness might be sometimes better. But I think it will get to way better data than we have right now. So what to do next? I think we need a broad discussion, as we do here. I discussed that paper also with Guillén, as you know, the director of the NWO. And at the Dondas, we are planning, perhaps by the end of the year or early next year, to have a symposium about it, how we can develop further the idea of team science. We need some small steps to look into our organization, how we can have the first steps, independent of the big change. What can we do to foster, enable such a team science effort? And then the big reform. I had just mentioned one example, but there might be also one we can do within. So what can we do within the Radboud UMC? The small steps. So that's the current system. We have a PI system, Hypatia Fellowship, and the internal PhD core. They're all based on individual science. They're all linked to getting either the PI further, the Hypatia Fellow into the system, and the PhD to learn and to get an independent scientist. We have also some things that are linked to team science. Perhaps the themes could be renamed to teams. And then we have the institutes as kind of the overarching structure. And the technology centers could be actually quite a good basis for team science as well. So what should we change to make it a bit more balanced between the two? We could say we have less PIs. We don't get more money. We could have less PIs. Could be one option. We could say that the internal PhD core are not given individual single PhDs. We could just say that's to 5 on one team or theme, and then they work there for 4 years, and you will get another 4 some years later, 4 years later, so that you have continuously a group of PhD students all working on one particular question or a set of questions. You could give the themes more weight, that they become teams instead of themes. And the technology centers, I think, are also very important. In addition, I think, and that is sometimes controversial, we should reduce the number of postdocs and increase the number of staff scientists, because that many PhD students are not becoming professor. I think that's totally fine, because we are teaching and educating young people to become analytical thinking people for the society. So that's, for me, more a training thing, and science is a perfect tool to learn that. But even for postdocs, a very small fraction will stay in academia, and I think we do not do a good job by keeping them on temporary contracts for long. The law is kind of stopping that now, but still, I think quite some postdocs are long in their career. And therefore, a staff scientist might be a good career option for them, where they have a longer perspective and a normal, conventional career. That would be the small steps. Should I go for the big one? You could be radical and just say, all the erste Geldstroom, the internal funding goes into infrastructure and team science, full stop. If you like to entertain your own individual research, get grants. And then we could have, instead of a theme, you could have teams, and then that's just my own research and my own ideas. So effective schematic memories are causing depression. How modulating the reconsideration improves mood would be an annual report, no author, just the stress-related disorder team at Radboud UMC, publishing that at the internet instead of some journal. Sorry, it wasn't asked before. So that could be the bigger solution, eh? Very simple and clear-cut. If you like to entertain your own show, get your grant. Or you can be lucky, you get money from someone like the Stichting Rhein Post, and then you can have, if it's a larger amount, you can at least build up a resource for a team science effort. And that's exactly what we do in the Healthy Brain. Even the design of the study is done in a joint fashion by a larger team of people from around the campus, from the Max Planck to the RU to the UMC. And that's, of course, you can have that kind of, and I'm striving for, I'm not dictating that, but I'm striving for to get the papers published based on that resource under the heading, the Healthy Brain Community, instead of the author list. These are options how you can embrace a team science effort already in the current system. And that's actually all I have to say. I would like to close with a quote from one of these geniuses, and that might link up to the idea of team science instead of individualized science. Thank you very much.
Ja, dankjewel Guillén voor een prachtig inspirerend verhaal met veel uitdagende stellingen waar we denk ik over discussiëren. Ik vergat u tevoren één ding te zeggen, dat Guillén een Spaanse naam heeft, in Duitsland woont, Engels spreekt, maar perfect Nederlands verstaat. Dus u mag kiezen in welke taal u zelf de vragen stelt, maar dat kan gewoon in het Nederlands dus. Wie als eerste? Ja, Thomas. Even de microfoon erbij.
Inspiring story, and I would be happy to work in such a theme, you know, or such a team effort. And I think you mentioned here a few people like you know, the Apple founder, you know, and I think that they work in a team, but there is a genius on top, and he actually defines the course of that team, you know, and then the team members become unknown, and I would be happy with that, you know. But then we need to identify those geniuses on the top, because somebody has to set the course and the vision. And I think he had a fantastic vision that how things can be done. And that's, I think, the most difficult part of the whole story. But you can do that. But then, of course, there is also, because you go a little bit on the industrialized manner, you know, but then also the consequences should be drawn. If somebody says that I'm the visionary and in 3 years it turns out not to be, then there has to be a consequence, and that person has to go. And I don't know how you see that happening, you know, with all these individual geniuses, what we have around, maybe 500 in this university.
Yeah, that was my attempt to get that done, by that we keep some alive, perhaps by their own grants, perhaps half, 250, to make it simple. And those 250 continue to work independently and generate hypotheses and pilot data supporting that hypothesis. And of course, in the long run, you can publish many of these kind of pilot data, as we do now, and it would require quite some, in your CV, if you do that continuously for longer periods of time, and nothing gets confirmed by a team science effort, then your career is not that successful. But if you have one after the other going into the depth and still holds your hypothesis, then it's really independently confirmed. I think that would be the mechanism in the initial system.
More just like I like Van Gogh. Huh? I'm Hungarian, but I like him. And I think he was a visionary, you know, because his brother told him that you have to paint academically because that's what we can sell. He said, no, I don't do that, you know. And he had to wait. I mean, he didn't actually live long enough to see his own success. So that's also a risk what we need to take when we set course.
Yeah.
Because you compared science to art, and at one point it's becoming
industry. As art. Yeah, I agree. There's a conflict. That's very difficult to balance. But I think I'm convinced that the old system, with only these artists, and on the world we are, how many professors? I tried to get the number of how many professors are on the world. I wasn't able to get that number. It's very difficult, and probably many of them are just teaching, don't do research. But we are talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands. The question is whether we need that many artists. There I have my question.
You know, but only a few will make it.
Yeah. We have to find those. Yeah.
Jos.
Yeah, just to follow on this and the Einstein quote, which is probably not a genuine Einstein quote. There are many things that have been attributed to Einstein that he never said.
A team
but
quote.
He was he invented Twitter, as you can see on the. Anyhow, no, the big problem is of course the human factor. And if I look around myself, I know a bunch of absolutely great geniuses. And actually you can divide them into groups. Those groups that collaborate, those that are collaborating all times, and with each it's easy to collaborate because their ego is not so big and the ego is not standing in the way. Whereas the other ones, they are impossible to work with and their ego is always standing in the way. And in the whole concept, it's very hard to accommodate this particular second group of people. They will be a pain in the team. And so the question is how, and you may not probably know from the onset that such a person will be the pain in the team. And so you need to have mechanisms then to work out a team in which everybody is happy, in which there is no killing competition, and so on and so on. And people are happy not to be as visible as the leader, perhaps.
I agree with you, but I think that our system has attracted so many of the second group because it's just kind of almost a character, kind of a trait you have to succeed as a postdoc. Postdoc has to be an egocentric beast, otherwise he or she doesn't get further. And there are other ways of doing it, more gentle ones and less gentle ones. But in general, I think we have attracted, and our field is attractive to people that like this individualistic approach. We don't like to get told what to do. But if you go to a company like Apple, I'm convinced they're also smart, and they are pretty much working together, and nobody will write their name on something they are developing.
Steve Jobs had a lot of problems during a period of time.
But it's not easy. But in the creative industry, I think there are quite many examples for egocentric guys like Steve Jobs, but also on teams working for them. And that balance, I think we have to get a different flavor of people, but I think there are also quite a large number of people that are quite fed up with the current system and saying, oh, I don't like to have that pressure and hyper-competition anymore, and I would be very happy not to give conferences and lectures and whatever, being the person visible, but I would like to do really science and work for that.
Just a small follow-up comment is that in this country we are very happy to pull people down that are sticking out of the on the mountain. Actually, we want a high level,
above the water,
non-competitive, and in that sense it would fit, but it might actually be a negative incentive to say really.
No, I'm fully with you. We should not do that. I really like to.
Inherent danger.
There's a danger, of course, but the balancing is an important point. I'm not saying that all the science should be, by far not. If it's 50-50, would be my compromise. But it should be 50% should stay more or less as it is. And even in my model, they should even be more free for their own research. They don't need any grants. They just can do it. We give them the money and the trust that they are doing excellent stuff. But I don't know how many FTE research we have in the UMC, 1,500 or something, 1,000, something about that, I would guess. With all the PhDs, 1,000, 1,500, something about that.
More, yeah.
Half of them.
We have 500 FTE in RIAS.
Oh, then it's 1,000.
So it's a little bit less, I guess.
1,000. So then you have 1,000. And I'm convinced, for example, I'm doing memory formation, yeah? And let's assume there are 600 people in the world doing human memory formation with the method I use. And if we would stick together and work together on that problem, really together, I think we would get way further. I'm convinced.
So the secret is in the right equilibrium between individual versus the team science. Aart.
Well, maybe I can add on that, because I'll try to understand what you mean by a theme. Or a team.
Yeah.
Because is it, from your point of view, a group of people from the same city, or can it be a scattered group around the world? And how do you see, because we talk about bosses and things like that, but if you look at the age categories, what type of ideas do you have in terms of numbers? Because I learned from one of my patients who was a professor in physics, he worked together with a group over the world. It was a floating group, you can say a big team. It was not well defined, and they were quite attractive to work on. We are very much oriented on groups in departments and things like you described. How is your thinking about what a team is?
My idea is a team is a kind of usually related to some methods, a set of methods perhaps, in one big institution. So they should really work together. And the age structure should be normal. There should be people in training. Perhaps they can do even a PhD there. I don't know. It's an open thing. And then all age ranges. And you can have different levels of hierarchy there as normal in all kind of professions. We have a very crude way of organizing our profession with the titles and different levels as being so strict. That is not common in many other fields in the economy around us. And hospitals are working also in teams. And they have young doctors in training, and they have a clear career path. And it's not that only 3% are able to stay of your assistant doctors, of your residents. That's a way higher percentage that they can stay in their profession.
But competition is less.
It's kind of structured. Yeah. It's a structured, normal, conventional profession. I think hospitals are actually very good examples of teams. Yeah. Where in an operating room, people are working together with different disciplines: technicians, nurses, doctors, anesthesiologists, also doctors. Sorry, and they're all working together. And this is, for me, a prime example of a team.
Teamwork.
Do you see a team as a defined category for a certain period of time, or is it free floating?
It could be really set. We have a team on, let's say, the Dundas would say, half our workforce is from now on dedicated to a team science unit, and we try to get as many contracts executing bigger studies.
The last remark, I'm very in favor to think about it, because when I see the younger people, say the younger students, they are more thinking about this type of working together. Yeah. I think as we learned each other in terms of PIs and things like that. So I'm quite optimistic about the future in your terms.
Ja, we zouden ook in staat moeten zijn om die mensen te selecteren op grond van teamkwaliteiten. Hè. Ze zouden ook op een of andere manier een assessment moeten hebben juist op dit aspect. Ja. Zonder te verliezen dat ze juist ook een sterke wetenschapper zijn. En soms is dat het een of het ander. Maar er zijn natuurlijk ook genoeg voorbeelden van het een en het ander. Daarachter is een vraag.
Ja, Jan Maarten. Well, that's my name, not a question yet. I want to share a thought on setting the agenda. stakeholders to our process or beneficiaries of our scientific work is society. So they're stakeholders to our processes. Should the agenda be set by stakeholder committees?
I'm totally convinced, and I'm supporting that often, that in the decision process they should participate. Whether they should be set. This country had a kind of a big exercise with a Nationale Wetenschapagenda, where really the public was asked. And after selecting out of these, 14,000 questions, kind of sets of really good questions, I think they came out quite some good ones. So there is certainly room for that. But the primary provider of the hypothesis should be the independent researcher. I'm still convinced that this is the more important. So we should not become kind of just the execution that we would like to solve now cancer, and now the politicians say cancer is a thing, and then the people suffering from something else are kind of convinced we shouldn't do that. So we have to see where the researchers see their way to go to, and then that could be done. But of course, stakeholders like patients or hospitals or companies should have their say.
So that it might come down to goals of society, methods of science.
I didn't get it acoustically, sorry.
Oh, so that might come down to goals set by society, methods set by science.
Yeah, like the European Union does it quite a bit. It's not a super transparent and super efficient way of setting the goals, I have to say. This is a difficult process to setting the goals. That's certainly the hardest part of it. But currently we don't have it at all. Just everybody can do whatever he or she likes. So idea. To get some more goal directedness, and that might be beneficial.
Jan?
Very inspiring talk, Guillén. I was wondering, in terms of scientific careers, we have now the PI system, and outside that we have nothing. So you become a PI or you're not a PI. Could you envisage that in the team structure you could have different types of scientific careers?
Sure.
It's the front runners, but also the water carriers.
Yeah.
If you know what I
no,
mean.
these are staff scientists. I think we missed them from the 70s onwards. They kind of were reduced, these positions already. And I think a larger number of staff scientists is essential for that. You need the continuity, but you have to find ways to motivate them. Apple has it with money, and being in a sexy company. These are kind of the two factors they have, and having a good goal. So the first one we can't do with taxpayers' money, but the second we can, to have the good goal and the ability to reach that. I think that could be enough in motivation for staff scientists. And there should be also a hierarchy. You can be just a assistant staff scientist and lead staff scientist of a laboratory, whatever, like in any other profession. So beside the church, the military and academia, everybody is happy without titles like we have in academia.
Ja, Wout hier, een vraag.
Guillén, part of your plan is already in shape, I guess. Because if you look at the new European Open Cloud Science directory, which is being developed, that's
yep.
one step. We're working now in a large network of team hospitals where all expert teams say work together or should start to work together, say 300 hospitals, 900 teams. So this is all developing now. The question is indeed how, with patients and those who need it, we will bring this to work.
Exactly, I agree. It's not a new invention or whatever, not at all. It's a kind of a movement that I think goes more to the core than of the cause of the current problems than other attempts like abolishing impact factors. I think that won't solve the problem.
Yeah, I fully agree with you and with the others that this is a topic worthwhile to have an in-depth discussion about. My first question would be, how many of those individual independent scientists we actually still do have?
Right now?
Die niet goed samenwerken. En die,
right now.
You think that we don't have them anymore?
In other words, aren't we already in transition?
to this team science approach?
Yes, in terms of collaborations, yes, but that's always a conflict. If you are a methods guy, you have to really struggle to get your senior author publications and to personal grants. There are the exceptional ones that are really developing the methods to new levels that it's visible like results, but all the others have a tremendously hard time. And therefore, we do collaborative research. I fully agree, a lot, and we have structures in place like the themes that are fostering that, and grants like the European Union grants or the Zwaartekracht or whatever grants. There are many collaborative grants, but still, each and everybody in that grant has to fight for their own CV, and that makes it so difficult.
The interesting thing I noticed myself, I'm getting older, luckily, that indeed what I'm doing, my task is to boost the careers of the young ones. That's my only task.
Exactly.
So authorship's position, I don't care anymore.
Yes.
But I realized that when I had to reapply for the PI stage, I was almost lost because I didn't care anymore.
Yeah, we changed
and that would have been also
just saved.
Just saved.
Just saved. Okay.
No, but you are belonging to the 5% privileged, in age and success. So for you, it's easy, and for me, and for some others here. But for the younger ones and many others, it's not that easy. That's, I think, the problem. If you force them into collaborations, and if a postdoc is doing something for you and for many years, then he or she becomes your right hand, but never a PI. And I think at that level, it's more difficult. So we are fine, I know.
A colleague research director.
Very nice presentation, Guillén. So if these competitive systems, like a PI system, for example, is such a problem, why don't we just abandon it and move over to the system that is currently running in the Faculty of Science, of the Science Faculty? So they just have a basic funding, and that keeps the same for years, and you don't have to prove yourself every time, and you can, do whatever you like, in essence. And I assume there is enough intrinsic motivation of researchers to do a good job.
No, I agree. So the best example is Max Planck Society, where each director gets, here you have 6 positions, here you have your expensive lab. Oh, you need more, here another 6 positions, no problem. And so there's the attempt of the Max Planck Gesellschaft is to make the directors happy. And they're willing to spend quite some money if you have good plans. And you don't need to apply for grants and these kind of nasty things. This is perfect for a system where you are really working with the top, the top 1% perhaps. Fine. But the sooner you go to a more broader structure and you like to be dynamic in the allocation of finances, you need some movement, and you have to put some pressure and some motivation so that things are all going to the same direction. I think that something is done. We all come from universities where there was not much flexibility. And whether this is the best in the long run, I don't know. The science faculty, the details I don't know, of course. But in the system I mentioned here, my hope was that we get the Max Planck model, kind of, where the few PIs we leave, 50%, that they just get erste Geldstroom and they don't have to apply for grants. I think that would be perfect, because then you're not concerned about these things. And you can just pursue your work, and you are...
of both.
Yes.
PI still, but
but not applying for
basic
it. Just
funding. Yeah.
Sooner or later you have to check, of course.
Good.
The other point is, can you have another?
Yeah, the final one.
The other point is, if you're changing the system in the Radboud UMC, can you do that without the world is changing as well?
Yeah, that's of course the tricky issue. You have to be concerned about the careers of your people.
Yeah.
And therefore, the small steps I think you can do. The big step, you have to be very careful, and the world has to embrace it. Otherwise, you are killing all the careers of the people. But still, I think you can have a group of people that are pretty happy to be part of a team and are not eager to pursue their individual career to become PI and professor. I think there are many people, and in particular, as you said, in the younger generation, that are very open for such a more normal career in science, a normal professional career. But then we have to provide these positions, staff science position.
Goed, dames en heren, we komen aan het einde van deze inspirerende bijeenkomst. Guillén, zeer veel dank voor de geweldige verhaal. Je ziet dat het heel druk is. Er waren ook heel veel vragen. Dus het leeft. Dus we blijven er met elkaar over in discussie. De volgende Grand Round zal niet over een maand zijn in de zomermaand, maar zal een maand later in augustus pas plaatsvinden. Dat is dan de volgende met dan een externe spreker. Voor nu zou ik u willen uitnodigen dat we ons naar achter bewegen en nog wat napraten over dit mooie onderwerp. En nog een applaus voor Guillén's prestatie.